What is up, guys? It is AJ from MMA Experts, and this is the UFC Vegas 11 full post-fight results. Also going to give you guys my matchups to make for the winners of the fights, and even for the main card fights. I may even give you some of the matchups I think for the losers. Now let's get into the first fight of the night. Tyson Nam defeats Irwin Rivera by second round TKO. It was an interesting matchup. I thought that Rivera may be able to use his range a bit better, but I did mention that the power of Tyson Nam will definitely be something to be wary of, and ultimately the power of Tyson Nam put out Irwin Rivera. We see Nam get a very big win here. I mean, granted, not against the most big name guy, but gets another win in the UFC and really has some momentum going for himself now with these two finishes in a row. Now, what do I think is next for Tyson Nam? Let's bring up these flyweight rankings. All right, so we have flyweight here. I know he did fight at bantamweight, but I do believe he's going to go back down to flyweight. I think that's his probably best weight class. Now, for Tyson Nam, looking at this division, I like the Matt Schnell rebooking. To be honest with you guys, I think that's a fun fight at flyweight. If not Matt Schnell, I could possibly see Raulian Paiva. If Paiva is not booked, it doesn't say he's booked here. Granted, that may have changed, but I would say it's between Schnell rebooking and the fight against Paiva. I think both those fights are fun matchups to make in the flyweight division. I mean, the flyweight division is always kind of a wide open division, I feel. A couple wins in a row and you can find yourself fighting for a belt. Tyson Nam definitely has a chance. I'm picking Nam versus, those two guys that I mentioned. Either you do the Paiva fight or you do the Matt Schnell rebooking. But let's get to the next fight of the night. Andre Ewell. He had a competitive fight, but he did win against Irwin Rivera. Irwin Rivera, tough guy though. He came on strong at the end and really went for it. But ultimately, Ewell gets it done. He now moves on in this bantamweight division. Who does he fight? We'll bring up the bantamweight rankings, but I will mention to you guys it is a massive weight class with a lot of fighters, so I may not really be able to give you an accurate pick for who he'd fight next, but definitely a potential matchup for who could be next for him. But let me bring up these rankings. All right. So we know that Ewell is somewhere down. We're going to have to look far, but I know that he's definitely not towards super far in the back. He beat Rivera, who on Ranking MMA was ranked 57th. I think that he still gets, an interesting fight next. Maybe you do potentially maybe Trevin Jones if they don't want to give him somebody too high ranked who's coming off a big win against Timur Valiev. I wouldn't be disappointed in seeing that fight. I mean, it's definitely a potential matchup. Andre Ewell here, 3-2 inside of the octagon, 4-2 now inside of the octagon. Did have that controversial decision win over Martinez in his fight before this fight against Rivera. I mean, if we bring up the rankings, there's, definitely some options here. I mean, maybe you see him and Brian Kelleher. I'm not opposed to that matchup, to be honest with you guys. I think Ewell, Kelleher, definitely a possibility. Also, maybe if you want to set up a good striking match, you do Ewell versus Gutierrez, but Gutierrez coming off the draw may not be as appealing. But I definitely feel like somebody like Gutierrez or Kelleher definitely could be next. I wouldn't be surprised if they go with maybe Brett Johns, a very tough grappler, and that wouldn't be an easy fight at all for Andre Ewell. It depends who they're trying to set him up against, and if they're trying to keep him a bit safer with some more strikers, or if they potentially want to put him in there against a really tough grappler. But let's get into the next fight of the night. This was uber impressive. We see Costa knock out, the very tough Journey Newsom. Newsom hits really hard, but Costa starched him with a massive head kick in round number 1. Randy Costa is somebody to keep an eye on. 6-1 as a pro, trains at Lausanne's, and also I believe at American Top Team. He's really developing nicely, and I think that he could be a potential player in the bantamweight division. Lanky guy, he's not short. I believe he's 5'10". That's going to be tricky for a lot of guys to deal with. I mean, he's about the same height as Sean O'Malley, who's done fairly well. Granted, now O'Malley loses to Marlon Vera, but very, very high-level guy. I think that we could see Costa do pretty well inside of the UFC's bantamweight division. Let's pull up the bantamweight rankings. We got a lot of bantamweight fights here. I don't know where Costa is even ranked. Here he is. He was ranked 60, and he wins against Journey Newsom, who I don't know where he's ranked. He's somewhere in here. But what could be next for him? It depends, again. Who do they want to match him up against? I'm not opposed to maybe a guy like Trevin Jones, who's coming off a big one against Valiev. I know I gave Jones a matchup previously, but I think that you could do Trevin Jones versus Randy Costa next. I wouldn't be shocked if they booked that. Looking through here, I mean, it depends what they want to give him. I think keep giving him strikers. He's a guy that brings a lot of fun. Maybe Jonathan Martinez. Maybe they bring him way up and really give him a big test against Jonathan Martinez. I think those are my two options. I'd say Trevin Jones or Jonathan Martinez next. Both could be interesting matchups, and I think winnable. Both are very winnable for him. Even, with less experience than both of those guys. But congratulations to Randy Costa. Big win over Journey Newsom. Now, next fight of the night, upset win. Darrick Minner defeats TJ Laramie by submission. I mentioned that you're going to see Darrick Minner be extremely dangerous in those first 2 minutes. He gets the submission in 52 seconds of the first round with guillotine. You cannot be careless against a guy with that good of a guillotine. And it's a massive win for Darrick Minner. Now, where does Minner go from here with this win over TJ Laramie? I'm going to be honest with you guys. It's not the biggest win he could get, but it's definitely a big win. I mean, it was a pretty solid upset. I'll quickly bring up the featherweight rankings. All right, let's get them loaded up for you guys. All right, featherweight rankings. Definitely going to be somebody more towards the back end of the featherweight rankings. And honestly, what's popping out at me is I like the possibility of Darrick Minner and Spike Carlisle. That's the one I'm going with. It just came right here. I think Carlisle had a really tough fight against Billy Q. He fought well. He's 1-1 in the UFC. Laramie was 0-0 in the UFC, and he lost to Darrick Minner, who lost a couple fights. I think Spike Carlisle, Darrick Minner is a very intriguing matchup, and I think there's a potential chance that we could see a submission win for Darrick Minner there against a very high-level grappler, Spike Carlisle. That's the fight that I like. Is Spike Carlisle versus Darrick Minner next, to be honest with you guys. I think that'd be really fun. All right, let me clear this down for you guys here. Well, let's get to the next fight of the night. It was a good one between two very tough girls. Jessica Rose Clark defeats Sarah Alpar. She does so by TKO round number 3. I did think that Alpar would be able to use her wrestling a bit better in the matchup, but ultimately Jessica Rose Clark showed she is no joke and why she is one of the top females in the world. Well, let's check out the division there. Hold on one second for you guys. Jessica Rose Clark, Sarah Alpar. All right, let's bring it up for you guys. All right, sorry about the delay here, guys. Just pulling up the proper weight class. So women's bantamweight bout, and let's bring it up. Sorry about the delay. All right, Jessica Rose Clark was ranked number 21 in the world at bantamweight. I mean, that's a pretty big debut for Alpar. And honestly, I thought Alpar definitely had a chance. Unfortunately, doesn't get it done. Who do you give Jessica Rose Clark next? I don't think you give her anybody too crazy. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I'm not opposed to her and Niko Montano. Montano only's had 2 fights in the octagon, even though she was on The Ultimate Fighter a few years back. I think Jessica Rose Clark, Niko Montano is the fight to make. I think it's an intriguing stylistic matchup, and I think it's very winnable for Jessica Rose Clark because I think she showed a lot of striking skill. She definitely can strike well. As long as she can keep her fights on the feet or at least not be smothered on the ground for too long, I think she does really good. She's got a decent grappling base, but I did think Alpar would give her a bit more problems with the wrestling, but good performance there. Well, let's get into the next fight. This was a massive upset as well. Actually, one that I predicted. Mirsad Bektic. Man, he was winning that fight early on, seemed to have it, and then unfortunately runs into a deep guillotine choke by Damon Jackson in round number 3. Good fight while it lasted. Bektic was controlling. He has lost fights in the 3rd round, and he gets submitted round 3 by guillotine. Big win for for Damon Jackson here. I think that we're going to see Jackson, potentially get a pretty solid fight next after winning his UFC debut. I mean, very impressive. I'm honestly happy for the guy. He's been around for a long time. And actually, not his UFC debut, his UFC return, because he has fought in the octagon previously a few years back. But let me bring up these featherweight rankings here, and we will make it happen. So the featherweight division, all right, we see Mirsad Bektic was number 18 here. I mean, you got to give somebody high level next to, I mean, you got to kind of, right? It's almost a necessity that Damon Jackson gets a big fight. I don't think you can bring him too far down in the rankings. I think maybe Makwan Amirkhani next. maybe that's the interesting matchup to set up, or even Grant Dawson potentially next. I mean, it's not a big fight for Grant Dawson by any means, but it's a guy who just beat Mirsad Bektik. That's a pretty massive win. I'd say you go Makwan Amirkhani or Grant Dawson next. I think those are pretty intriguing matchups. I do think the Makwan Amirkhani fight, though, is a lot more winnable. I think that Grant Dawson actually would win that matchup against Damon Jackson. But let's get to the next fight of the night. Moving towards the main card here. Still, not the main card just yet. All right, we have the fight between David Dvorak and Jordan Espinosa. Dominant performance by Dvorak, wins a unanimous decision. Did predict that. I thought it would be a pretty similar fight to how it went. Beautiful leg kicks thrown by David Dvorak. I mean, he's definitely an intriguing guy in this 125-pound division. I'm excited to see what's next for him. I don't think he gets a crazy step up just yet, but I think he's going to definitely get a fun fight next with a win over the very tough Jordan Espinosa. But let me get these flyweight rankings up for you guys here. All right. The flyweight rankings. Obviously, he's not fighting Davison Figueiredo next. But Jordan Espinosa was ranked around number 19 in the world. Do you rush him and give him somebody higher level, or do you keep him more towards the back end? I mean, personally, I think he can compete with a lot of these guys. I'm not opposed. I mean, if they want to put two big prospects against one another, do Albazi versus Dvorak. I think that's a freaking crazy matchup and definitely a winnable fight for both men. But if not, I mean, you could potentially, I mean, whenever Manel Cape debuts, that's what I'm excited for. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing Manel Cape debut against David Dvorak, but I don't really think it happens. I think the UFC will probably give him a fairly tough test right away. Zalgis Zhumagulov is not a bad matchup. Yeah, he won a fight in the octagon just yet, but I mean, he went the distance with Paiva, who's tough. He beat Ali Baguchinov outside of the octagon. I like the fight against Zalgis Zhumagulov. I also like a potential fight against him and Tim Elliott. I think Tim Elliott would be a very tricky matchup, and I mean, Tim Elliott's a guy that makes you look bad. I like both those matchups. I think those potentially are the ones. I doubt they do the Amir Albazi fight. Don't want to risk eliminating two up-and-coming prospects just yet. I think the Tim Elliott or the Zalgas fight is what's next for David Dvorak. But now we finally have arrived at the main card, and it started out with a very competitive matchup between Darren Stewart and Kevin Holland. I mean, Kevin Holland actually felt Darren Stewart may have won, or it should have been a draw. He was really disappointed. He said he wants to run it back. I don't think that happens. I think that when he watches the tape, he'll probably say, you know, I kind of deserved that decision. But in the moment, obviously was super disappointed with himself. He was on a pretty good streak, had a really nice finish, 2 in a row actually by finish, and then goes out and squeaks by the very tough Darren Stewart. But it's still a win. It still counts for something. I mean, it's definitely not an easy matchup fighting a guy of the caliber, of Darren Stewart, a guy that can strike and has some power and some decent grappling skills too. But what do we do next for Kevin Holland? He's kind of in a weird situation. I mean, do they give him a guy that, only has one fight in the octagon? I doubt. I don't think that you throw him to the wolves just yet, but I think you kind of got to give him a fight. I mean, it's tricky looking at these potential matchups. Kevin Holland is really moving up the ranks fairly fast. I'm not opposed to him and Ian Heinisch. Him and Ian Heinisch, if Heinisch does get past Brendan Allen. So take that back. Honestly, he's already booked against Brendan Allen. Probably won't happen. I think that Kevin Holland want to get back in there. I mean, maybe crazy enough they will rebook that fight, but maybe you do him and Marvin Vettori. And it's not that Vettori doesn't deserve something better. He most definitely does, but I think that Kevin Holland will be willing to take that fight, and Vettori's looking for a matchup. So right now, I'm going to do Marvin Vettori versus Kevin Holland next. I think that that's the fight that will happen, and I think it is an intriguing matchup, which I think Vettori will ultimately prevail in. I think he's going to be a bit too much for Kevin Holland, especially after seeing his performance against Stewart. He really did struggle with the grappling, and I think Vettori is definitely a bit better than Darren Stewart. But let's get to the next fight of the night. Women's fight here. Mackenzie Dern taps out Randa Markos. I don't know why Randa Markos chose to go to the mat with Mackenzie Dern. I don't know what made her do that. I mean, I know that she had mentioned that no way I'm getting to the ground with her, but she went right to the ground, and then she got tapped out, which was as expected. I predicted a submission win, and it went about how you could have predicted it. I mean, just dominant performance by Mackenzie Dern over Randa Markos, who was, a top 15 girl in the world, or at least by Ranking MMA. I don't know the official rankings off the top of my head, but this is a massive win for Mackenzie Dern here, and I'm going to say she deserves something fairly high level next. I mean, you can't give her somebody that's probably not in the top 15 after this win. This was very impressive. I'm going to throw two names out there, and I'm going to see if you guys maybe agree with these potential matchups. How about you either do Tecia Torres or Marina Rodriguez? The Rodriguez fight would be a massive step up, but Tecia Torres, I think that's a possible fight, and I'm going to be honest, I think Tecia Torres cannot win that matchup. I think it's a very bad matchup. The size difference is pretty substantial. I think Marina definitely would have a better performance, but I think the Marina Rodriguez loses that fight as well. I think either one of those girls are good matchups. Obviously, the Amanda Ribas rematch is something Dern will want, but I don't think she's ready for that just yet, especially after especially after Ribas dominated Paige Van Zandt in her last fight. I think Ribas is on to probably be a top contender in this women's division as well. But I think you do the Tecia Torres or the Marina Rodriguez fight next for Mackenzie Dern. I think both of those are compelling matchups and very winnable ones as well. But let's get to the next fight of the night. Actually, we missed a fight on the undercard. I want to go back. I apologize, guys. We almost forgot about this matchup, and it was a good one between Mara Romero Barella and Myra Bueno Silva. So it got lost down the track there, but we're going to give it the due respect. Silva taps her out early in round number 1. She did well. It wasn't really anything else happening besides they went to the ground and big submission win for Silva, which I did think that she would get the victory. And now, she moves forward in this women's flyweight division, which is another division which I feel is pretty wide open. If you win a couple fights, you could definitely be in contention for a title. But let's pull up the rankings of the women's flyweight division. I don't think there's too many girls there. All right, let's see. Barella is not a high-ranked girl, so I don't think this is a massive win that's going to move Silva way up. But I do think it's a good win, and I think that you got to give her a solid test. I don't disagree with maybe doing Sabina Mazo next, who just won last week against Justine Kish. I think you do Sabina Mazo versus Silva. I think that's a very intriguing matchup and a winnable fight for both girls. And I think Mazo will give her work on the feet. I like that fight. I think it's a fun matchup. If it goes to the ground, I think Silva may have a bit of an edge. But on the feet, that's a very compelling matchup. And I do think they will engage in a lot of striking. But now, let's get back to the main card. Apologize for that. All right, next fight. Johnny Walker starches Ryan Spann after he was hurt. He was out on his feet. I'm going to be honest, the hype train of Johnny Walker has definitely been a bit derailed. I feel it's definitely on the downhill. I definitely don't feel like he's going to be the guy to beat John Jones or anything like that, like we originally kind of felt. A lot of people at least did. I think that we're going to see Johnny Walker be a tough contender in the light heavyweight division, but susceptible to getting hit with big shots, but has a ton of heart, and came back and beat Ryan Spann, who was looking really good and looked on way to a TKO win. But what's next for, Johnny Walker? I don't know what's next for Johnny Walker, to be 100% honest with you guys. We're going to look at the rankings real quick, but it could be anybody. Technically, ranked number 13. You know what? I think you got to do Johnny Walker versus Ovin St. Preux. I think that's the fight to make. I think it's a very intriguing matchup. Both guys are awkward. Both guys have knockout power. Both guys can be knocked out. And I'll be honest, I don't know who gets that fight. I think it's very competitive. I think you have to do that fight. I think we do Johnny Walker, Ovin St. Preux next, and I think that would be a lot of fun as well. I think that'd be a back and forth battle, which I do believe St. Preux has a significant chance of winning and beating the former hot prospect, I'll say, Johnny Walker. But still, tough up and coming guy, Johnny Walker is. Now, Ryan Spann, I do think he'll bounce back, and I do think he's a player in this in this 205-pound division. But he's gonna have to get a couple wins back together after taking his first UFC loss in fairly devastating fashion. It was very disappointing to see him go out like that, but he did give a competitive fight while it lasted. Well, let's move on to the highlight of the night. Khamzat Chimaev destroys Gerald Meerschaert. For Meerschaert, I honestly feel for the guy. He was talking about making it competitive and how he wasn't just a stepping stone. And he finds himself unconscious within 20 seconds. I believe it was a 17-second knockout in round 1. And his fight before that, he was knocked down like 30 seconds. Maybe his chin is gone and he has to retire, and it's just making Khamzat look that good. But I think Khamzat Chimaev is that good. Now, we don't even need to bring up the rankings. We know Damian Maia is probably next for him. I think that's a scary matchup for Damian Maia because Khamzat Chimaev just showed that he has insane knockout power. He hits really hard, and his precision is really what got him the knockout, less of even the power. He set it up and hit it beautifully and put Meerschaert unconscious in one shot. I think Khamzat Chimaev is the real deal. I've said it since day one. I believe he'll be fighting for the world title within 2 years and probably be winning the world title within 2 years. Great performance there for Khamzat Chimaev, and cannot wait to see what's next for him against probably Damian Maia. But let's get to the co-main event. A bit disappointing, no winner. Cowboy Cerrone versus Niko Price ends in a draw. Back and forth fight. Point was deducted in round one for the eye pokes against Niko Price, on Donald Cerrone. The point was deducted or I guess you would say it was deducted for Niko Price. Niko Price lost 1 point in that first round, and Cowboy Cerrone ends up getting a draw. I thought he potentially could have won the fight, but the second round was truly a toss-up. First round, I thought Niko Price won it, 9-9 first. Let's say it's a 10-9 Price second, and then we got a 10-9 third for Cowboy. We got a draw here. It's a majority draw. One judge did give it 29-27 for Cowboy Cerrone. I think that we'll see Cowboy maybe consider retiring because he really didn't look all that great. Niko Price, tough journeyman. I'm not going to give really a matchup next for either guy because the divisions are packed and there's so many options. I think definitely going to be an intriguing matchup next for Cowboy because I think it could potentially, if he does choose to fight one more time, be the last time we see Cowboy fight. He's looking older, and I think for his own health, I think he should retire. But if he wants to keep going and keep making money, I guess you can't stop the man if he's not getting TKO'd or knocked out. He still went 3 rounds and gave a competitive fight ending in a draw with Niko Price. But let's get to the main event. Colby Chaos Covington versus Tyron Woodley. Dominant performance by Colby Covington from start to finish as expected. He actually gets the stoppage in round 4. Woodley, I guess technically you could say he verbally submitted. He said his rib was broken and he was done. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I think Woodley should probably consider retiring at this point. Yes, he's lost to 3 of the best in the world, but he's kind of gotten whitewashed. He's lost every round in his past 3 fights, and I think it's time to consider calling it a career. He had a great run, and he was a great champion at one point, but he lost what he once had. But if he wants to go one more, I'm not going to knock the man. Give him one more fight, and hopefully he goes out on a win. Just not a top guy, please. Not somebody in the top 5, maybe in the back end of the top 15 even, or maybe, top 10, maybe the back end of the top 10. I'm be honest, I prefer top 15, somebody not as high ranked, and we get Woodley a win, and he can call it a career, but I don't know if that will be something he's interested in doing. But for Colby Covington, absolutely big win. I think it puts him right back into contention. I don't think he deserves a shot just yet against Kamaru Usman, but I think we're going to set up the matchup between Leon Edwards and Colby Covington. I'm not even going to bring up the rankings because I know them off the top of my head. Leon Edwards, Colby Covington needs to be next. Leon Edwards needs to get his fair shake. He needs to get himself a big fight, and I think that that's the matchup, and I think that sells. I think it's a competitive matchup. Time to give the due respect to Leon Edwards. I don't think Colby Covington versus Usman is next. I think Usman Burns is next, and who knows if somebody gets injured, how long they'll be off. Masvidal booked to fight Nate Diaz. That's the fight to make, unless they want to do Wonder Boy Thompson versus Colby Covington, which I don't think they do. I think you're going Leon Edwards, Colby Covington next. Hopefully sometime in 2021, in the early part of 2021, hopefully by maybe March, we'll see that matchup. And I think it would be a great fight and a very potential winnable fight for both men. I think it's a good stylistic matchup. Maybe Colby will be back even sooner against Leon Edwards. I know Edwards is itching to get back in there. It's been a while. He beat Rafael Dos Anjos in his last bout. But I think that's the matchup, man. And I think that's a fun one, too. I think Colby Covington potentially wins that fight against Leon Edwards, and then he's truly established, okay, I'm ready for the Usman fight again. But I won't be shocked if they do give him Usman if Usman beats Burns, because it's Colby Covington, the beef is there, and it will always sell. But all right, guys, that is pretty much it for the post-fight results and what is next for the winners. I hope you all enjoyed. Make sure to like, subscribe, turn on those post notifications. Also, guys, follow my social media, Instagram, Twitter, and I'll see you all in the next video.